Welcome to How Effectively Chair a Committee Meeting. Hi, my name is Louise Gardner. I will introduce myself later on in the presentation. Welcome. We're going to spend the next hour together, and I'm very excited to talk about how to be a great committee chair. So for today's agenda, we are going to go through my introduction for 5 minutes, chairing and planning meetings for 15 minutes, running meetings and minute taking for another 15 minutes, and then closing off with how to close a meeting and what action items need to be determined for next steps. Now, the reason this slide is important is because of timing, and that's one of the things when we are doing any type of committee meetings. We want to make sure that people's time is valuable and that we're respecting that. So first off, we are going to do my introduction. And that is going to be 5 minutes. And notice that I actually have that on my presentation. Now, you may be doing your meetings with a slide presentation or without, but it's always good to let your attendees know where they are and how many minutes are in each particular area to keep them on time and you on time as a chair, because that is your role. So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Louise Gardner. And there is my email address if you have any questions. The presentation will be made available online, but if you have any other questions or you want to chat with me about something, I'm always available. I retired in January of 2019. I had been a senior leader with Carlson Lee Travel. I was on the Canadian executive team. I oversaw North American leisure. I oversaw 150 locations that had over $1 billion in sales. So quite a large role operationally. I also worked with marketing and supplier management and technology in order to do that role for approximately, I guess maybe 15 years. I've been in the travel industry over 40 years. I sit on the Association of Canadian Travel Agencies. That is our association for retail travel agents. I am the treasurer of ACTA and I sit on the board of directors. I did sit on the TICO board of directors for over 5 years. If you're not familiar, we are a regulated province in the province of Ontario for travel under the Consumer Protection Act. And TICO is the Travel Industry Council of Ontario, and I sat on that government board which legislates travel in our province. From a Rotary perspective, I am a president-elect, so I am looking forward to taking on the role with the Rotary Club of Kitchener starting July 1st in 2020. Interestingly enough, I am the 99th president of that club. I am also a past president of the Rotary Club of Kitchener. I was president in 2002-2003. I sit and work on the District 7080 Training Committee. I have been the chair of the Rotary Leadership Institute, and I'm a facilitator, hence this presentation. In my years of working in the industry, I've been honored with a few awards. I was CWT's Outstanding Associate Branch of the Year when I used to own an agency back at the beginning of my travel career. I also won the KW Better Business Bureau Integrity Award, and I was nominated as Woman of the Year for my philanthropic work with Rotary back in 2002 as well, the year that I was president. So now we look at timing, and so I should be on my 5-minute mark. If I'm off, that's fine, but I just have to keep track of my timing. So now I'm going to show you a short video. It's going to be 3 minutes, and it's a little look at a committee meeting gone wrong. Maybe you recognize yourself in this.
And we were at this restaurant.
All right, guys, you guys ready to get started?
Hang on a second.
Trip, you ready to get started, buddy?
Okay, hey, you guys, we're all here. We should start.
All right, thanks for coming, guys. I just wanted to take a few minutes and talk about some ideas for the marketing strategy this year. So if you got one, just throw it out there. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, how long is this meeting supposed to last? The schedule wasn't exactly clear.
Should be out of here in 30.
Is that approximate or?
Hey guys, sorry I'm a couple minutes late. I got caught in traffic.
7 minutes, actually.
What's that?
A couple is 2.
So what we're doing is we're just coming up with some ideas for our new marketing strategy.
Sure.
So, anyone?
I think we should implement Pinterest.
Ooh, that's a fun idea.
What about a publicity event in the park?
Interesting. But how are you going to plan around the weather? What if it rains?
So we'll party in the rain.
Okay, just want to emphasize there's no bad ideas here. We're just brainstorming. So.
Yeah, I'm just really thinking it'll be a huge waste of money to try to plan around the weather.
Yeah, okay, we get your concerns. Nancy, thank you.
Okay, anyone else have an idea? Ephraim?
I've always wanted to see rain fall down all at once in a big splash instead of small drops over time. I mean, think how it could impact the irrigation system.
Okay. Terry?
Well, I have an idea from my previous job that I had last year. But, let me take that back a little bit. I have this wonderful idea, but it doesn't really make sense unless I just take it back a second and bring it forward together. It was like 3 weeks ago that I remember he said something that I couldn't understand.
Hold on a second, Terry. Hold on. Thanks for pointing. Here's what we need to do, okay? Lauren, you got this? We do a video submission contest on YouTube.
Oh, that's been done.
It'll be on Facebook, it'll be on Pinterest, it'll be on Twitter.
If we do something with technology, we lose the senior demographic.
So, you guys want to see an example?
Should we be moving on to the next topic? I mean, it's already quarter after.
Quarter after. That's funny.
Who knows how to put this on the screen? Up there, because you're not going to be able to, I want you to see all the details. We have a cable. Does this cable work?
I think that's power.
I don't know if on the there's an
This one.
HDMI
That cord's not going to be long
and
enough.
in the back,
Does that
there
remote
could be
go to the
like 2 or 3,
TV?
like HDMI 1.
Plenty of time,
HDMI
guys.
2,
No rush.
HDMI
This isn't
3,
working.
I got a
and
green
they
marker.
coincide
Call the
with
IT
each
guy.
other with,
Wait,
there's
turn
also,
what off and back
what
on?
do you call it? S-video.
Hello?
Okay, I've got it working.
Hit play. Okay, now imagine hundreds of those floating around the web. Do you want to watch it one more time?
No, please.
Trip, I think you're onto something with this idea. I really like it. Carol, did you get that down?
Yeah, got it.
Sorry, what is C-test up sub YT pros?
Well, I'm abbreviating to make room for all these great ideas. Contest, uploading it to YouTube, funniest, and you get a prize.
Wait, where are the other ideas?
And time.
Wait, where are y'all going? We still have 100% of the things to accomplish.
Well, how many of you have attended that meeting? I know I've been there quite a few times, and I know it's a funny little video, but it does bring home some of the reasons why we need to plan our committee meetings and our board meetings so well. So remember, don't be the leader by title only. So this presentation can help you with a committee meeting or a board meeting, but it can also help your other Rotarian members who also might be chair of committees in your Rotary Club for the next or future Rotary years. So it will be posted on the Rotary District 7080 website, so I encourage you to please share this with other committee leaders. All right, so next up we have chairing and planning. So we have 15 minutes to get through this particular segment, and hopefully we'll be able to stay on time. So this is what we call a sub-agenda. So it gives you the idea of this particular section and what we are going to be covering. So during chairing and planning a meeting, we're going to talk about the chair and the co-chair responsibilities, the who, when, where, and why, preparing your agenda, and then a quorum. So chairing your committee, chairing and co-chairing responsibilities. The first thing that you need to do is to arrive on time and finish on time. And that is extremely important. And I have been probably, now that we're in a Zoom world and a lot of our meetings are done over, over the internet, and everyone is in a work from home isolated situation, which may or may not happen in the future. But regardless whether you're doing this over a Zoom meeting or you're doing this in a boardroom, you want to make sure that you're starting your meeting when you say you're going to start your meeting and you finish them on time. If you are waiting for people to arrive to those meetings because of traffic or other situations, as we did see in the funny little video, it causes us to be off in our agenda. So we want to stick to the agenda. We want to be respectful and be open-minded throughout the meeting. So no idea is a bad idea, but we do want to make sure that we're always moving the meeting forward. We want to hear everyone's views. but we make sure that everyone is speaking one at a time. If you've got a couple of, little pockets of people discussing things on the side, as a chair, it would be your responsibility to kindly ask them to, get back and bring it back to the business. Avoid any type of side conversations. If there are conversations that need to be had, make sure that they are being told publicly throughout the meeting and not discussed by two people and then repeat it again, because again, that is a waste of our time. Clarify any type of decisions that need to be made before the meeting and during the meeting. Do not dominate the meeting. Your role as a committee chair is to facilitate. It isn't for you to be speaking 100% of the time. You're not a miracle worker, so keep that in mind. You need to have some cooperation from the committee members that are joining you during the meeting, and you want to cultivate relationships. So sometimes it's important to have other individuals join your meetings. They might be friends of Rotary. For example, if you're putting a Rib Fest on and you're doing it with a local park authority, you might want to have them join your meeting, etc. And so be open to that. The who, when, where, and why. So attendees, you need to confirm your attendance prior to the meeting. And so this becomes difficult because how do you do that? And the easiest way that we've found is to use a doodle poll. So this is a free poll. It can be found at, as you see here, the URL address, www.doodle.com. And what happens during this poll is that you will send an email out to all of your committee members. So let's say you have 10 or committee members that will be joining you. And we'll just use RibFest as an example. So you have 10 members that are going to be joining the RibFest and you need to meet. Now, it's great if you are at a Rotary meeting and the 10 of you are sitting around together and you can predetermine a date and time, but sometimes that's not possible and it doesn't really make sense because people might not have their calendars and they're not quite sure. So the doodle poll is something that you would send out via email. They would click on that link. It would bring them to a poll where they would choose, you would predetermine a number of dates and times that are applicable. They would choose which one they are available for, and then of course majority wins, and you would hold the meeting on that particular date and time, and then you would submit that back to the group. The time of day, how often, and what to bring is important. So sometimes determining if you're going to have ongoing committee meetings, and I think most of you would do this, but it's a good tip. You might say, we always like to meet 30 minutes prior to a Rotary meeting or 30 minutes after a Rotary meeting because we're already in the Rotary spirit. Or maybe these are meetings that will only happen when they're needed ad hoc, or maybe the committee decides that 7:30 in the morning is best because many of you are working and that's the better time. Also understanding what to bring. So is coffee available? Yes, in some instances, no in others, and it's always nice to make sure that your attendees know whether there's going to be coffee or refreshments or lunch served if it's over lunchtime, or what the parameters are going to be around the meeting, and of course what documents to bring. Now, I always suggest when we get to the agenda that you actually print a hard copy of the agenda for everyone that will be attending the meeting, but other documents, printing them all could be a waste of paper, so advising in your email with the date and time, the Zoom link, whatever it is that you will be putting in your information email, to include any of the documents that they should be printing or bringing or reviewing during the meeting so that they understand all of the information that needs to be available. So time of day, how often, and what to bring. Where and how. So again, is it at the Rotary meeting? Are you going to meet at restaurants? Is it going to be a Zoom meeting? It's important to make sure that you're denoting that in the when you send the agenda out as an attachment to the meeting invite. I always suggest that the agenda be an attachment and not in the body of the email. That way it can be saved into files, especially if you're using Club Runner and you're keeping documents in the committee section, and also for your committee members who like to keep things organized. If you have it in an email, they don't have much of a choice when it comes to filing other than using their Outlook, and sometimes things can get lost. So why have the meeting? So what is the mission of the meeting? Is it information gathering? Is it to generate new ideas? Is it a progress update? Is it a decision-making meeting? Is it a combination of some of those or all of those? Always ensure that there is a need for a meeting. If you're holding a meeting just because you say that, every month on the last Wednesday of the month, we're going to hold a meeting and there is really no agenda worth holding, you can postpone a meeting. It is not necessary to have a meeting. So please make sure that it is going to be informative and it's going to bring value to the club. Mission statement. The definition of a mission statement is a short statement as to why your committee exists, what its overall goal is, and can it be predetermined or created by the committee. So sometimes you will have that defined prior to your committee meeting starting. For example, Rib Fest might be something that's been done and there's no changes. It's just a same old and we move forward. But sometimes you may be creating that mission statement when you're at the committee meeting with your members. So before you're holding your first meeting, predetermined which of that it's going to be. So preparing your agenda. Agenda tips. Create a draft agenda and distribute 3 or more days prior to the meeting. So this sounds like a lot of work. I get it. A lot of people and many committee chairs feel that it's just as easy not to have an agenda, just to say, hey, we're going to meet on Wednesday. We're going to do the Rib Fest thing. We know what we're going to do. Let's move ahead. But if you don't have an agenda, your timing can be off, and also you're not giving the information that the committee members should know prior to attending the meeting. So creating a draft agenda and distributing it is a good way to do that. Consulting the committee on agenda items. So in Rotary, we are all volunteers. We are all giving of our time. So these meetings are more consultative than they might be if you were running a business meeting, for example, where you might be the boss and it's your agenda. So always allowing your committee to have input on the agenda items and to include more items or maybe delete items or move items. It's always a good idea to get feedback from the committee itself. And as I said before, always distribute a hard copy of the agenda at the meeting. Although everyone has best intentions that they're going to print that agenda and bring it with them or have it, this would not be the case for Zoom meeting, but definitely for in-person meetings, you want to make sure that everyone has that agenda, and that's a place where a lot of people will take notes. Create a committee template. So if you have an agenda, sometimes it's good to have an agenda template for your club. So you might have that posted in Club Runner. It can be in Word, it can be in Excel, whatever you're comfortable with. But if you are a committee chair and that is not available at a club level, you may want to create a committee template so that you're using the same agenda over and over again so it becomes familiar to your committee members. Make sure that you include timing on your agenda and who is leading each of the different sections, and this will allow you to stay on time. So for example, now I'm in my second section, which is the 15 minutes of this particular, sub-agenda area, and I want to make sure I'm staying on time. So if I have my printed agenda in front of me, I know that I'm leading this and I know that this is how many minutes I have. The next session might be a different committee member, and then they may have the opportunity to know, okay, they have 15 minutes, and then you can keep them on time because it's denoted already in the agenda of how much time they have. A good idea, for example, in board meetings would be when you have your committee chair reports, there's quite a few committees in Rotary, you might allow your committee chairs 4 to 5 minutes to do their report each. And as you're doing your timing and they get close to that, you remind them. Now, of course, there's give and take because there'll be a flow to the meetings, and that'll allow them to maybe take 6. Someone might take 6 and someone might take 3. But all in all, you want to keep things on time. And that's not always possible. And we'll talk about that in a future slide. Always attach the information, as I said, that is required for reading in advance. So quorum is important because if you're making any decisions that require a majority, and this is not in all cases because sometimes decisions are made and sometimes it's just a consensus, but if you are at a meeting where a decision needs to be made, you need to ensure that there is a majority and that there is a quorum. And that is the same for a committee as it would be for a board meeting. Specifically for a board meeting, a quorum is mandatory. So for example, if you have a committee of 5, makes sense, you would need 3 to have a majority. Committee of 3 would require 2. Discussions without a quorum are certainly appropriate. And by all means, if you're not making decisions, you can have, if you don't have a quorum, lots of discussions can be had. But making a decision without a quorum can lead to future misunderstandings, because if you have a minimum number of your committee members attending a meeting and you make a decision, and now you have other members that are not on the same page as what you've already decided, now you have to go back and you're recreating some of those decision-making processes, which really does not flow nicely when you're trying to keep your meetings to have some good content. Try to reach decisions by consensus, as opposed to doing a vote. So meaning, we've decided that we're going to move forward with our Ribfest on Sunday, May the 25th. That's a great consensus. Everybody agrees, perfect. But sometimes you may need to have a vote if there's a decision might require a vote. If there's an outcome where you feel that the consensus is not quite there. If you are actually doing a vote, make sure that you document in the minutes of your meeting that there has been a decision made that went to a vote, or a consensus. Always good to have both in your minutes, but especially if there are financial consequences to the club, to make sure that everything is documented correctly. So now we're in another subsection called running a meeting. And now, again, we should be checking our time, because I should be at 20 minutes in, and I want to make sure that I'm not running over in my time. So here we are, running a meeting and minutes. Again, we have another, what we call SUBAgenda, and we look at this, and in the next area, we're going to be looking at introductions at a meeting, the terms of engagement, a parking lot, collaboration, discussion versus decision, violent agreements and disagreements, and taking minutes. So now everyone knows what we're going to do in the next 15 minutes. So now for me, I'm the presenter. I'm looking at the screen. I'm doing a Zoom meeting. This will be recorded, so I want to make sure that the content is great, that the information is coming through to you in a nice steady flow. So I might not be checking my time as much as I could. I could check my clock like this, but it would maybe be, not the greatest look for someone who's supposed to be looking at the screen. So in this particular instance, I have a feeling that I'm on time, but I know that all of you are looking at your watches right now, and you know exactly whether Louise is ahead or behind. And if we weren't doing a recording, I'd be able to actually take you off mute and be able to have some open discussions with you. You can also have some timekeepers as well, committee chairs that help you with that. So this isn't something that you have to do on your own, because committee is a group of people. All right, introductions. Introductions are not always needed, but always ensure that everyone knows each other if there are new attendees. And don't assume that people know each other. So if you're bringing people that you are not familiar with, or you think other people might not be familiar with, please make sure that you do an introduction. You could use a little icebreaker. A nice little icebreaker could be, what's your favorite movie? Sometimes if you're going to spend the day together doing some brainstorming and you don't know each other, finding out a little bit about each other, and not necessarily your name, who you are, your club name and your club size, but maybe a little bit about you personally. That's what an icebreaker will help with. And if you need any help for icebreakers, if you Google icebreakers, you will get tons of them. Whiteboard expectations. So what are you looking to get out of this meeting? So this is something that I always like to do. And if I'm in a boardroom and there's, say, 10 plus, I always try to have a whiteboard there. It can be, a paper whiteboard, or it can be a board on the side, a chalkboard, whatever. But finding out what people are looking for and what they want to get out of this meeting, because knowing that one person in your meeting figures that this is the meeting where you're going to decide exactly what's happening at RibFest, what the budget's going to be, what the date is going to be, who's going to be on the committee, what the subcommittees are going to be. And that may not be what someone else is looking for. Someone is saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. The only thing I want to get out of this is, are we having a RibFest or are we not having a RibFest? So understanding from each of your participants what they're looking to get out of the meeting will help you facilitate the meeting and be a better chair. In terms of engagement, everyone in the committee should know the simple rules to ensure that no one person takes it personally if you have to remind them of what the rules are. So this is important. You know, terms of engagement can be interpreted in two ways. The terms of engagement that I have here are basically the running of the meeting, of the committee meeting. Another term of engagement would be, what is the committee about? So there will be terms of engagement as to what is this committee supposed to be accomplishing, what is its mission statement, what is its budget, what is its fundraising requirements, etc. But this particular terms of engagement is for the meeting itself. So you want to set a list of expectations. What is it that you want them to do with their cell phones? What about food and drink? What about the timing? What about the participation? So you want this meeting to start and end on time, and you want future meetings to start and end on time. So that is an expectation of your committee. So if you set that at the beginning in your very first meeting and make sure that people come 5 minutes early so that traffic doesn't affect them, if it's an in-person meeting, then for sure the next time when they arrive and they're late, this expectation has been set. You can remind them of the terms of agreement, and they don't take it personally because you're not singling them out. They need to be fully prepared for all the meetings. So your expectation is that they read all the documentation in advance. They shouldn't be doing it on the fly when they're sitting at the meeting for the first time, because they're going to be spending more time reading the documentation than paying attention to you and the members around them that are trying to hold a conversation. Being in the room. So no cell phones. Now that's easier said than done. There are many people who are at meetings who have work requirements where they might have to answer a cell phone. As long as your terms of engagement are understood by everybody, it might be, please put your cell phones on vibrate, so that if you do have to have a phone call for urgent matter, we certainly understand. Please leave the room if you're going to do that, and be no longer than 5 minutes, etc. So that is up to you and your committee to set those terms of engagement during the first meeting. Don't talk amongst yourselves. Don't interrupt other people. Just a common practice for meetings. I'm sure everyone knows that. Paying attention to the circle of control. So the circle of control is the people who are controlling the meeting. So you'll see this quite a bit, where you will have a meeting of 10 members and 3 or 4 of them are that A-type personality. They've done this before, they put on the rib fest, they know what they need to do. They're the circle of control, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you as a committee chair need to be paying attention to that to ensure that other members of the committee also feel like they play a role. Because if they're a silent partner and they're sitting at the table for an hour and their voice isn't heard, they may feel that they don't want to interrupt. They may feel not as confident as other members. It is up to you to make sure that you watch that circle of control and let people know about the circle of control as part of the terms of engagement. As in, for example, those of you who've been on this committee for 4 or 5 years are going to know more than Susan over here, who's just joining us as a new Rotarian. But let's make sure that the circle of control allows Susan to participate and give some input into the meeting. So again, you've predetermined these terms of engagement. Create and review the SMART actions. And then record those actions and commitments in your calendar and make sure that you're following them. So everyone knows what SMART action items are. If you don't, you can Google it. So you want to make sure that SMART. So they have to be, and I've lost my definition of SMART action items. It's been a while since I've presented this particular session. So that's something you're going to have to Google, but definitely, we want to make sure they're actionable. We want to make sure they're measurable. We want to make sure they're attainable, and we want to make sure they're timely. So, so please Google that for the actual definition. I do apologize on that one. All right, consensus rules. So make sure consensus rules is the easier way to hold a committee. This isn't a board meeting. In a board meeting, definitely there would be votes, but in committee meetings, consensus can rule. But then a majority if it is taken to a vote. And again, that goes back to the quorum. Parking lot. Always ensure there is a whiteboard or a side note, and that doesn't have to be on a flip chart. If you're holding a Zoom meeting, it could just basically be a piece of paper that you have by the side of your desk that you can make sure that you are making notes on. So flow of ideas that don't necessarily pertain to the agenda but could be useful in future discussions should be noted in what we call the parking lot. So for example, you're doing your rib fast and discussions around, timing, and in this particular meeting, as well as, what date it's going to be, who's going to be on the committee, how many subcommittees are required. Those might be all things that you have on your agenda. But getting down to whether you're going to serve wine or beer at the event might be on a future agenda and is not really part of your plan of discussion today, but they shouldn't be forgotten. So they're put into the parking lot. So if someone brings up an idea, for example, are we planning on serving wine or beer this year at the Rib Fest? Great idea, but we're going to put that in the parking lot because right now we're talking about the venue and the dates, and we'll remember to circle back to that or make sure it's on a future agenda. So this allows you to respectfully park an item and move on. And then at the end of the meeting, you can circle back and determine if any of the ideas that weren't fitting at the time that they were brought up might now fit because those discussions did go down that path. And if not, you can keep track of those in the minutes, and then you can make sure that you put them as a future action item on future agendas. An easy way to do that is to take a photo of the whiteboard. Taking pictures of different things is something that you should consider doing because they can easily be shared as a JPEG with your committee members. Collaboration. Be inclusive. Make sure that the roles and responsibilities that you have in your committee are doable. So you always want to make sure that you're talking to your committee members because you don't know what else they have in their life. I always say family comes first, then comes business, then comes Rotary. And if you can keep those priorities straight in your mind, then you will know that, that you will be a Rotarian for life. And so when you're thinking about committee members, making sure that their responsibilities are doable and they fit not only in their Rotary world, but in their overall world is a good idea. Streamline the amount of governance, and I know that by looking at this presentation, I'm adding governance, meaning I'm asking you to create an agenda. I'm asking you to take minutes. I'm asking you to do a parking lot. Yes, for sure. I'm asking you to, to look at quorums and decision making, etc. But trying to keep the governance as to a minimum as possible makes meetings much more enjoyable. Participation engages members, so ensure that all members have an opportunity to participate. Sometimes you're going to need to go around the table to get everyone's input. But you got to keep the inputs to the point. So as a chair, that is your role. And if we think about that little funny committee meeting video that we saw, there'll be all types of committee members. Yes, there's going to be the committee member that's going to be late, the one that is going to want to talk for 15 minutes about one simple idea, the one who's going down a rat hole that makes no sense at all, and so on and so forth. So trying to get everyone's input and making sure that you're managing that input is one of the your responsibilities as the chair. You don't want to single out quiet individuals, but give preference to people who haven't spoken. So, you don't want to say, hey, George, we haven't heard from you today, but we want to say, George, I know that you're new to the committee. I know that you must bring an important point of view. What is your point of view on this? So trying to make people feel that they're part of the committee by not necessarily singling them out. And sometimes, again, by going around the table, that helps. So everybody has an opportunity. If you know you haven't heard from someone and you're going around the table, you don't always have to start to your right or to your left. You can start with that person and then move around. Ask for volunteers. Even if someone comes up with an idea, it doesn't necessarily mean that they want to be the one that goes to run with that idea. And I think that's one of the major things that we do in Rotary. It's sort of like, oh, great idea, Bob. You came up with that? Well, you go ahead and do that. Well, Bob didn't really want to do it. He just thought it was a really great idea. And maybe Sarah is the one that would love to step in and do that because that's a bit of her passion. And, she loves to do PR where that scares Bob. So let people feel that if they do come up with an idea during brainstorming, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be the ones that are self-volunteering to do that. And don't stifle the dissenters. They may have very useful contributions and they should be heard. Discussions versus decisions. Discussions are healthy, but they can go on too long without making a decision and then drift away without an action agreed upon. And this is very common in committee meetings. The chair should listen. They should always jot down a few key points throughout. Reminders of what the issue is and what decisions need to be made is very helpful. Don't assume that silence means agreement. It seems we agree that is a way that you could present that. So you're listening, you've come up to what you think is a consensus. It seems that we agree that we are going to do the Rib Fest on May the 26th. Can we get a consensus on that? If it's yes, then you recap the decision and you assign timelines and assign ownership. And always make sure that you have a timeline and you have an owner for a decision or an action item, because if a committee holds a meeting and everybody decides it's the right thing to do and no one is the point person, doesn't mean they have to do it by themselves. They may include 1 or 2, 3 people. They may be told to go out and get volunteers to assist them. But at the end of the day, if there isn't one person that's going to put the bell on the cat, you're going to be at your next committee meeting and that action item is going to be on your list of things to do. And I'm telling you, it won't be done between then and now. So you need to assign it to someone. The worst thing that you can do is assign it always to the chair. If you're the president of the club or the chair of the committee, you can't be the one doing everything, because at the end of the day, there are not enough hours in that day for you to do that. So you need to make sure that you are doing the assignment. Ensure the minutes correctly reflect the action items, when they are going to be accomplished by, and who the owner is going to be that is going to bring them back. Now, if there isn't a decision, then you can take it to a vote and the majority wins, hence the need for a quorum, or you can defer it to the next meeting and assign more research to be done on the topic prior to the next meeting. So you don't have to take a discussion to a vote if there's no consensus, but you will need to defer it to another meeting if you cannot come to a consensus or take it to a vote. So those are 2 things that should be top of mind. Violent agreements and violent disagreements. Violent agreements. If the committee agrees, move on. It is a complete waste of time for everyone to provide their individual example as to why something will work or not work. So if you've decided that you are going to have a Rib Fest, everyone does not need to put their 2 cents in as to why it's a good idea to have a Rib Fest. If there is violent agreement, and this is a lovely term, I love this, move on. If there is violent disagreement, well, you have to go back to your rules of engagement. You have to go head-to-head with the disagreements, or head-to-head disagreements should be recapped and then moved onto other members to see how they feel. So 2 or 3 people may violently disagree that moving forward with Rib Fest during a time such as a COVID or a world event or a downturn in the economy, anything can disrupt a future event or an idea. So if you do have some disagreement, you want to recap. So I understand that because of the financial and we feel this and this, let's see what everybody else thinks. And then you move it on and let other people give an opinion towards the violent disagreement. Repetitions, again, should be noted, and the group discussion should resume. So again, violent disagreements should not be done over and over. If you disagree, then you just have to say disagree. We don't necessarily need to know the exact reason why you disagree, because it's probably very similar to the person before you, unless you have something that is extremely different or a point that you need to raise. What suggestions do we have for how this could be improved? So that is a good way when you're stuck in a disagreement is, okay, so we can't agree on this. We know that we want to do something. We can't agree what it is. What suggestions do we have to improve on it so that we can get to an agreement? So it's not about whether we agree or disagree. It's how do we come to an agreement? If we tweak this, if we move that, will that help? And group support. Do people want to spend more time on this, or do they want to move on? So sometimes if you have a violent disagreement and you can't agree on a point, maybe it's time to just move that to an agenda at a later date when things will become more clear, and again, when more research can be done. But group needs to support that. So again, as the chair, you would ask, should we continue with this discussion? We are just remembering that we may run out of time and we may not be able to cover other agenda items, or do we park this for now and move on? And if it is we park it and move on, then that needs to be noted in the minutes so that we make sure that we don't forget that we've had a violent disagreement on a particular topic. And there needs to be more discovery done. Taking minutes, who's responsible? In a volunteer organization, everyone is responsible. It's very hard for you to be the chair and be the one that is expected to do all of the agendas and take all of the minutes. So it is much more agreeable and enjoyable to be part of a committee where everybody shares that load. And some people are busy in January but are happy to do it in May, and other people are vice versa. And so, you know, between the committee members, you can figure it out. Now, every once in a while, there might be somebody who loves to take minutes. And so if you've got that person who says, I'm in and I'm going to do them all, then by all means. But make sure that it's something that they do want to do. Again, rotate the schedule prior to the meeting, or ask at the beginning of each meeting who is going to be the minute taker for this particular meeting, and then you need to make sure that somebody steps up. That can be difficult because if it's silence and there's crickets, well, now you've got to assign someone, and it becomes a little bit harder. So that's where possibly predetermining a minute taker is the right way to go. Where at the beginning, on the very first meeting of your future committees, you decide who's responsible and when they're going to do it, and then that way it's predetermined, and they can switch amongst each other if things come up that are that might happen. Oh, I was going to do it in April, but I couldn't, so I'm going to switch with someone in June, and then we'll swap it out. Minutes should be distributed shortly after the meeting or prior to the next meeting. But if your rules of engagement require pre-reading, then you need to ensure that there is appropriate timing to get the minutes to people. I will say that I have a preference, and I always have in my business world and in my Rotary world, to have minutes distributed as quickly as possible after a meeting, so people have a lot of time to review and do the pre-reading for the next meeting. Minutes should be point form and concise. They should not be paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of text. But if that is not possible, the last thing that you want to do is be providing minutes of the meeting an hour before the meeting happens, because it is completely unfair for the committee members to be expected to read all that content prior to a meeting if they've only have an hour to do it. Minutes are a legal document, and they are admissible in a court of law. So you have to make sure that when you do take minutes, whatever you put in your minutes, that you understand that. Because if there was ever something that happened at Ribfest and you were taken to court, any of the minutes of any of the committee meetings would be admissible in a court of law. So now we get into the closing and follow-up, which is the next 15 minutes. So I believe I'm probably in my correct time frame. I'm looking at my clock now. I see that things have progressed well, other than the fact that I don't know what a SMART goal is. And you'll be sure that I will be Googling that at the end of this particular meeting. But now we're ready to the final segment, which is the closing and the follow-up. So I want to make sure that you understand about being on time and why it's important. Is because you don't have a lot of choices if all of a sudden you're running out of time. So if I was now at a point where I have 15 minutes left in my presentation and I only have 5 minutes of time left, I have a couple of choices now, and I know that I have to make these choices public, and we have to decide what we're going to do. So if I only had 5 minutes left at this particular time, I'd have to say to you, well, I'm sorry, but we have gone over time because we've had some very positive and great discussion previously, and I didn't want to curtail that discussion. And the goal isn't always the time; it could be the content and the process as well. But at the end of the day, I will not have time to do my closing and follow-up. I will have time for 5 minutes to do a recap of the meeting and to do any last-minute questions. So this particular segment, we're going to need to move to the next meeting. Now, people might say, well, you know what? I'd prefer that we continue on and run the meeting another 15 minutes. That's a bit iffy for people who are in the business world and who are trying to manage home and Rotary, and they're philanthropic in their home and their business world. Because if you say, who is okay to go another 15 minutes? you might have 9 people who are, and one person who really doesn't want to or can't, and you've put them on the spot and they feel a little upset because they were expecting the meeting to be over. So oftentimes you might ask at the beginning of the meeting, does anybody have a hard stop at, say, 2 o'clock when the meeting is supposed to end? And 3 people will tell you in advance, yes, because I have another meeting, or I'm getting in the car to drive my kids to soccer, or whatever that is. Then you'll know that you absolutely must be on time. If people are like, no, we can probably go over 5 or 10 minutes, then you know you have a little wiggle room at this point and you don't have to make those decisions to defer. Closing and follow-up. So the last of our segment. So here's our sub-agenda: keeping on time, being results focused, action items, celebrating successes, saying thank you, and planning your next meeting. Keeping on time. How to end a meeting on time. Keep your content appropriate to the time allowed. This presentation has 30 slides and therefore is 60 minutes in length, because I always average 2 minutes per slide. And I have been in conferences where I've been the executive leader for a conference of over 200 people, and I've got a team member who swears to me that they can do their 95 slide presentation in 60 minutes because there's a lot of pictures and they won't talk a lot, and I guarantee you they always run out of time. And they end up either having to take extra time, which is a problem for the next presenter, or they're cutting their time short. So on average, if you take 2 minutes per slide, it's a really good gauge. And again, if you don't have slides, it could be 2 minutes per section or 2 minutes per topic. You need absolutely a minimum of 2 minutes, and then possibly more depending. At the end of the meeting, you always want to give yourself a 5-minute warning. And the reason that you want to do that is so people understand how many minutes are left in that particular time. And the 5-minute warning shouldn't come from you as the chair. You should assign someone to say, could you please give me a 5-minute warning? And then that way the person can say, excuse me, we're at the 5-minute mark for the end of the meeting. Oh, great, because you're the chair, you might be taking minutes, someone else might be taking minutes, your mind is racing, etc. on top. So you want to make sure that helps you stay on time. Allow people to leave if the meeting goes over. So you got to watch your quorum if you're planning on doing any votes. But if it's a consensus and you feel comfortable, you may want to allow some people to leave if the meeting goes over. So it's very appropriate to say if somebody has to, leave for urgent business, or, please feel free to do so. You can catch up with the minutes of the meeting. One of the things that you can do at the 5-minute mark that I've seen done, which is very successful, is you as a chair can stand up and continue the meeting standing up. And you can actually ask your committee members to stand up as well. And it sort of makes them understand that the meeting's got to come to an end, and it does help curtail conversations. I've seen that shorter meetings can be done standing up right from the onset. So if you were, and this is good for your business world, maybe not for your Rotary world, or maybe your Rotary world, can we get together for 5 minutes after, the Rotary meeting? I just want to, get a consensus on something. Don't sit. Stand in the corner of the room and your meeting will be much shorter. If you sit down, guaranteed you're going to be 15 minutes plus. Standing up, you might take it, you might be 5 plus. Again, you can decide to regroup at a later time if you're running out of time. Make sure that you work the agenda. Use a visible clock. I have always had clocks installed in all of our boardrooms. When I was at Cross and Motley Travel in Toronto, we had 5 boardrooms, and I was the one that instilled and made sure that we had visible clocks in all the boardrooms. I have a visible clock in my office. I can look up and know exactly what time I'm at and exactly where I'm at. If that's not possible, you might like to have a little travel clock, but those little travel alarm clocks are great as well to bring with you if you don't know whether there'll be a visible clock or not. Or take your watch off and put it on the table, quite acceptable. Allow 5 minutes at the end for other business, and stop the meeting when the work is done. So if the meeting is finished and you have 10 or 15 minutes left, it is a bad idea to continue conversations or starting new agenda items or going back and recapping and using up the time. If it only takes 45 minutes to do a 60-minute meeting, all the best, end the meeting early. Now, I do know that in some instances, some people prefer to do meetings for 55 minutes as opposed to 60 minutes. So they'll have a 55-minute agenda because they know their meetings always go over by 5, and that keeps them on time. So that's another little trick as well. Results focused. Keep the purpose of the meeting in mind. What are you trying to accomplish within the time allotted? What does success look like today? And don't try to solve world peace in 60 minutes. Chunk it down, ensure the agenda reflects this. Use a go or a no-go question throughout. So this is a great idea, and part of a lot of, if you've ever taken any courses on project management, a go or a no-go statement is usually included. So you'll get to a certain point where you've had a lot of discussions and you need to sort of decide, is this a go or a no-go? So is this a go for us to actually consider doing a RibFest, or is this a no-go? And it forces these decisions throughout, and you'll get used to this. And again, this is something that you can Google to get more information on it, but it is a really great tool to make sure that you're results focused and not just having a whole lot of discussion, because starting a meeting with a lot of discussion and ending the meeting with a lot of discussion, there's lots of great conversations going on and there's no decisions that are being made and no future action items, then really it's just a conversation. It's not really a great use of time. So having short, organized conversations that drive to making decisions, whether they be decisions for today or action items for future decisions, but being result focused is always a good idea when you're holding a committee meeting. And every committee member is accountable for the overall results, and every individual is accountable to their action items. So being part of a committee doesn't mean that you're just a committee member and you can just show up and just, you know, be the timekeeper and then leave and not be accountable for the results. So it's a team, and especially in an environment like Rotary where you're leading volunteers. Action items. There it is. Smart action items. Make sure they're specific, simple, sensible, individually responsible, measurable, meaningful and motivating, achievable, agreed upon and attainable, relevant, reasonable, realistic and resourced and results-based, and time-bound, that they are time-based, time-limited, time and cost-limited, timely, and time-sensitive. Now, there is a great definition of a SMART goal. And now you don't need to Google it, and neither will I. And it will always be here because this is a recording. A chair should not leave with all the action items on the list. It is extremely important as your chair to, as a chair, to delegate, delegate, and delegate, because it is a committee and it is a team effect. And you want to make sure that everyone on your committee has a piece. And that is your goal as a committee chair, is not to be the one that leaves with all the action items. You may leave with some, but not all of them. Celebrating successes. Well, it's always successful when all of a sudden you didn't know what a SMART goal was and now you do know. So celebrating success. Everyone loves a success. Don't be afraid to start your meeting with a good news story. What went well since we last met? What's going well? How much money are we making? Focusing in on the positive and making sure that you're thanking people, and plan a wrap-up party, a meeting after the event. So once your last meeting is over and your RibFest is done and you've reviewed the budget and you've done all your due diligence and the work is done, have another meeting and celebrate. It could be a Zoom celebration where you just chit-chat about the fun things that happened during the event. It might be an opportunity for you to get together in person and have a backyard barbecue party, or maybe just meet, you know, an hour before your Rotary meeting or an hour after your Rotary meeting. And, you know, maybe you bring some penny candy and maybe you buy a round of drinks on the committee, whatever you would like to do to celebrate. Always celebrate your successes. And thank you. A small thank you goes a long way. As volunteers, a thank you can never be oversaid. A shout out by individual name is always welcomed. And bell ringers at a Rotary meeting is a really great idea. So if there's something that's happening and you hear as a committee chair that one of your members has gone above and beyond or put together a wonderful document or a proposal or went above and beyond and got you 50 volunteers to help at the event, shout them out by individual name, thank them for what they've done. And not only in the committee meeting atmosphere, but also at the club level. When you're having a Rotary meeting, ask your president if they would do a shout out. Everybody has a different, we do bell ringers at the Rotary Club of Kitchener. Some people do shout outs, whatever that might be. Could be a notice in your e-newsletter or your bulletin. Anything that makes people feel, that they've been recognized individually, because again, we are volunteers and we're not getting paid for this. So it's always nice to hear our name and be thanked. And the next meeting, never end a meeting without reconfirming the next meeting date. So you want to, have pre-scheduled meetings, make sure that they are at the end of the agenda. So if you always meet on the last Wednesday of the month, the last action item on your agenda will be, our next meeting will be on Wednesday, July the 29th at whatever time it is, in whatever format, at the hotel, in the restaurant, via Zoom, more details to follow, etc. The next meeting decision could be done at the end of the meeting. So if you don't have pre-scheduled meetings, you'd say, okay, when do we want to next meet? Okay, well, let's do it. I think we should meet 2 weeks from now because we've got some, action items that are timely, or let's meet 3 weeks from now. Or if you can't decide, not a problem. I'll send out a doodle poll and then we'll figure out the next date. And then this would become an action item in the minutes that you are going to send out a doodle poll, and it would have the date that you're going to send it out by, the date that you're going to decide by, and who is actually going to send out the doodle poll. Again, does not have to be the committee chair. And here's an example. A doodle poll will be sent out by Bob by April the 20th for a final meeting date decision to be made by Bob on April the 22nd. And then therefore you would need to follow up with an email or an in-person, if it was a Rotary meeting, etc., on April the 22nd. So that is being an effective chair. Make your meetings irresistible. Here's my email address again, lg.gardner@rogers.com. I'm very happy to have been able to present to you today. And as you see, being a chair, being a facilitator is all about getting your message across, talking to your audience. You might not always be right. You might not always know everything, as I didn't or did. But at the end of it, you want it to be irresistible, and you want people to have fun during your meetings, and you want to make sure that they're well organized, and you want to make sure that at the end of the day, you've got some great action items, and you deliver great results, and you make your meetings and your club irresistible. Thank you very much. I'm Louise Gardner. That's it for today.